everyone, thank you for joining us at IMSTA FESTA 2020 so far. We hope you're having a great time. My name is Marie Lim, and I'm a music technologist and a Bitwig certified trainer. In this video, I'm going to walk you through my favorite parts about Bitwig Studio, which is an amazing music making software that's made by Bitwig in Berlin. The music that you're hearing right now was made in Bitwig Studio. In my previous video for IMSTA FESTA, we went a little bit behind the scenes and took a look at how we made that music in Bitwig. In this video, we're going to dive even deeper into Bitwig Studio, and we're going to take a look at more devices, MIDI polyphonic expression, how modulation works in the DAW, as well as the grid. So let's get started. So in our first video for IMSTA FESTA, we spoke about some Bitwig Studio basics and how to get around the program. So over here, we're still in the arranged timeline with the clip launcher to the left, and this together is our entire Bitwig project. Each of these horizontal lanes in Bitwig Studio that we see is a track with either audio or MIDI information on it, and we previously ended on the note of pun intended, we ended on the note of instruments and MIDI data, so let's pick up where we left off. Now, one of my favorite parts about Bitwig Studio in general is its integration of MIDI polyphonic expression, or MPE for short. MPE allows us to be a lot more expressive than usual with MIDI performance and recording and editing, so let's take a moment to find out how that works in Bitwig Studio. For this part, I'm also going to have the help of my Sensel Morph, which is this controller over here. It's made by the company Sensel, and I just love how it's lightweight and portable, really easy to use, user-friendly, has a great app that comes with it too, and it's able to transmit MPE data. I'm not going to go super in-depth into programming the morph in this particular video, but I do want to make sure that we can at least get it up and running with Bitwig Studio and use it to record in MIDI information. So these same steps that I'm going to walk through will apply to setting up most MIDI controllers in Bitwig, even if they're not MPE enabled. To start, I'm going to head over to the Bitwig dashboard to set up my controller. I can click on the Bitwig icon right at the top and center of Bitwig Studio, and this is going to take me to the dashboard. It's going to pop up, and I want to make sure that I'm in the Controllers tab on the left. This tab lets me manage the different MIDI controllers that I've used with Bitwig before, and the morph shows up right here, Stencil Morph MPE. However, it's grayed out at the moment, so I want to make sure that it's turned on by clicking on this power button icon that lines up with its name. Now, once I've done that, the power button lights up in orange, and to the right, I can see that my MIDI input and output drop-down menus are both set to the morph. So great, now that I've confirmed that these things are set up, I can click on the X at the top right of the dashboard and head back into the main body of my Bitwig project. So as I was working on my project before, I recall thinking of a few possibilities for me to record in some more expressive synth lines. So let's jog our memories a little bit. As a refresher, I'd like to listen to a part of my arrangement, and let's start from around bar 33 in my arrange timeline. Cool. So upon listening back to my arrangement, I know that around bar 41, I start moving into a sparser type of section. Previously, I had a couple of other pad clips there too, but they were exactly the same as my pad clips in the earlier part of my arrangement, since I did program and launch them from my clip launcher. So I think this later section towards the end could be a really good opportunity to create some kind of other synth line on the same instrument. I'm not really thinking of something that's super complicated melodically necessarily, but I do think I would like something a little bit more nuanced. So let's prepare to record in some MPE synth lines on my pad instrument that's in pink over here at the bottom of all of my other tracks. To prepare for this, I'm going to make sure that my track is armed by clicking on this button over here. This button with a circle in it is going to let me arm my track for recording to prepare it to receive MIDI information, and I know that my track is armed if the button is lit up in red. I'm also going to test things out on the morph, so here we go. Cool. Great, things are working. We can hear a little bit of bending as well. So let's record. I'm going to put my cursor at bar number 37, so I have a bit of preparation time before, but I'm going to press record at the top of Bitwig. It's this button over here that has a white circle in it, and we'll be off. Nice, so I just recorded a little bit of MIDI information, and now we've got this synth pad taking us through the outro of my arrangement. I've double-clicked on it to pull it up inside the detail editor. Let's investigate a little bit more of what was going on. So we've got the clip selected. We can see a couple of things going on in the lower part of Bitwig. If we take a close look, each of my MIDI notes has a little tiny squiggle in it, and that represents pitch bend information, which can sound a little bit like vibrato sometimes, and even with multiple notes playing at the same time, like over here. Each of my notes can have their independent pitch bend data. So let's go even deeper and check if any other expression data was recorded. I'm going to click on this icon at the bottom left that looks a little bit like a sideways lollipop, and that's going to show note expressions. So once I've done that, I have a new lane at the bottom that's popped up, and I can click on this drop-down menu on the left, which currently says velocity, and choose the note expression that I want to see. So keeping in mind that the morph is very sensitive to pressure, it's a pressure sensor MIDI controller, let's check if we have pressure data. And yes, true enough, we do. So the morph was able to let me record my pressure variations into Bitwig for each note. And with this visual representation, let's play things back and listen to how things sound. Some interesting bending at the end, but that wasn't too bad all in all. And listening to my performance, I do want to clean things up first. So to start, I'm going to make sure that the start and the end of my clip aren't too far out. So let's select the empty space at the beginning of the clip and press delete on my computer keyboard, and we'll do the same thing for the empty space at the end. Now let's head back into our clip and zoom out a little bit. Off the bat, though, I'd like to quantize my performance. And quantization is a really useful feature that will let me snap my recorded MIDI notes to the nearest grid line so that I can tighten up the rhythm of my MIDI notes. So let's click inside the detail editor and we'll press Control A on a PC or Command A on a Mac to select all the notes. After doing so, I can press the letter Q to quantize the notes and we might see them move visually. Yeah, so there we go. Now, one more thing I'd like to do is control the MPE pressure data just a little bit more too. You can see that we've got quite a lot of dynamic range, and by that I mean that some things have very little pressure and some have much higher pressure. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but let's fine-tune things. So I'm going to click inside the pressure lane over here and drag across all of these MPE data breakpoints so that they're all selected. Once that's done, I can click on any of the points that have been selected and I can drag them either up or down to edit their range. So in this case, let's shift them just a little bit upwards. And that's an example of how we would record and edit some simple MPE performances in Bitwig Studio. At this stage, I'd like to revisit my vocal edit track that I created earlier. And let's focus on a 4-bar section in the arranger for now. I'm going to click over here and make a selection of my vocal loop. And I'm going to press Control L on a PC or Command L on a Mac to activate my arrangement loop. When I play my arrangement now, this 4-bar section between bars 25 and 29 will loop. And let's also select the track so that we can solo it on its own. And let's take a listen. किसी क्या कहूँ किसी क्या कहूँ Cool, so a few things are coming to mind. One of them is that I'd like to add some more audio effects to this track and process it further. And I might also want to add more sonic variation somehow. So before I get too far ahead of myself, I want to add some kind of device behind my delay 1 audio effect that I initially used to add delays to this vocal edit track. I want something to change the timbre even more in a nutshell. Let's also go ahead and make sure we have the device panel popped up. So that's the delay that I was talking about. Let's head back over to the bottom right of Bitwig and click on the little folder icon to pop up the browser panel. And now in the devices section, let's use our trusty search bar to find a filter device and add it to our track. I think that could be a good first step. So there it is, there's filter. I'm going to click on it and drag and drop it behind my delay. And now on the filter itself, I get a couple of different options for various filter shapes, but I think I'd like to go for this bandpass filter at the moment. So I'm going to click on this. Let's drop the resonance down, which is this knob to the right, and let's also just increase the filter frequency a little bit and take a listen to what we have now. Nice. So let's do one more audio effect. And this time, let's pull vocoder over from the browser. So let's search for vocoder over here. Now, apart from using this device in a more traditional sense for vocal synthesis, I also really like using it to add more noise or color to sounds. So let's click on it. We'll drag and drop it behind the filter and let's check out what's going on. I'll also keep tweaking parameters while we're listening to things. So here we go. Okay, so things are starting to sound a bit more interesting, though I do wish we could have still a little bit more movement to the sounds. So let's look into how Bitwig Studio's implementation of modulation might be able to help us. Before we do, let's take a step back for a second, and the term modulation refers to how one component can influence another in a controlled way when it comes to sound design. And earlier on in my process, in this particular video, I mentioned the term vibrato when I was doing my MPE recording, and vibrato often refers to the subtle bending of pitch back and forth. In that first instance, I made vibrato happen by physically performing it on the sensor morph, but another way that we can make that happen in synthesis is through the use of something called a low frequency oscillator, LFO for short. An LFO is a device that has the ability to go between certain values, whatever we specify, at a fairly slow rate, and it's usually very controllable too, as its name might imply. And if we use that LFO to control a synthesizer, including a software synthesizer, we could use the LFO to vary pitch and create vibrato that way. So yes, an LFO is a pretty common type of modulator, and it's one of the modulator devices in Bitwig Studio that I use the most often as well. So let's start with that, and I think I'd like to use an LFO to add some variation to my filter device first. So on the filter device's name panel, there's a tiny icon at the bottom that looks, again, a little bit like a sideways lollipop, but this time there's an arrow at the end. And we've got the icon lit up in orange at the moment, which has popped up 3 boxes with plus signs in them. If I click on the icon, they'll go away, but let's have them out for now. If I click on the top box, this is going to let me instantiate some kind of modulator. So let's go ahead and take a look at the options we have here in the pop-up menu, and I'm going to go ahead and select LFO to begin with. Let's click OK, and boom, there it is. So now to use this LFO to control a particular parameter inside my filter device, I can click on the modulator icon in the box that's currently going between white and blue. It's alternating. And I can then assign the modulator to any of these parameters in the filter that are shaded blue. So let's start with filter frequency. I'm going to click on the filter frequency knob and drag upwards. It's going to end up creating some movement, and I'll do the same as well to the resonance control here, but this time I think I'll drag it in the opposite direction. So let's click and do this. Great, now we can see it moving a little differently. Now let's click on the modulator icon to exit mapping mode, and let's take a listen. Cool. Now, one thing you might have noticed is that while I was listening back, I was still tweaking the parameters even though they were already being modulated. And that's one of my favorite parts about the modulation system in Bitwig. Modulation is relative and not absolute. So if you want to make changes to a sound that already has modulators mapped to its parameters, you can totally do that in Bitwig Studio. Bitwig has its own unique program-wide method for dealing with modulations, which is called the Unified Modulation System. And this system allows us to very easily assign and edit modulations so that we don't get stuck with the fixed absolute modulation that I just mentioned. But let's take this one step further. So what if I wanted the same modulator to change some parameters on each of my audio effects over here at the same time? So something on delay 1, something on filter, something also on vocoder. I could totally do that. But first, I need to put these 3 devices into one FX layer, which is like a group in Bitwig. So I'm going to click on my delay 1 device. I'm going to hold down the shift button and then click on vocoder. I can then right click or control click on the group and say group. Great. Now all these devices appear in one FX layer. This layer also has modulators available. So let's head over here all the way to the left. We'll click on the FX layers modulator icon, similar to what we did just now. And here we've popped out the modulation options. But this time, let's add to the first box a classic LFO and let's sync it to the tempo of Bitwig. So I've got it pulled up here in the first box, but to fine-tune the LFO parameters even more before I assign things, I'm going to hover over the box and click on the little white triangle that pops up to the right. So once I do that, I'm able to see a couple more options for shaping the behavior of the classic LFO. Let's set it to oscillate in rhythmic subdivisions, and we'll make these, let's do 8th notes. And maybe we'll also make it a little bit less intense. So let's click on the amount and bring it down to 50% from 100 instead. And let's also make the LFO ramp shaped. So let's click on that. Now let's assign it to modulate at least one thing in each of our nested effects. So let's click on the icon so we can start mapping things, and I'm going to have it control the mix of the delay. Let's also have it control the post gain on our filter. We'll do the mix on our vocoder as well, and maybe let's also do the formant, but in the opposite direction. So let's head over to the left, get out of mapping mode, and now we'll take a listen. We can see all of the modulated parameters moving. Nice! So I'm on a fairly decent track with what I have in this project. The one thing I was thinking of for the outro section of the arrangement all the way here at the back was to augment it with some kind of special sounds. So let's take a listen to the end again. One place that I immediately thought of for some different options for sound choices was the grid. The grid was first introduced upon the release of Bitwig Studio 3, and it is an open modular environment that's really great for building and editing and customizing your own sounds. As someone who does use modular synthesizers for performance and composition, it always inspires me creatively whenever I work with the grid. So for this last lap, let's just get a glimpse of what we can do in the grid. Let's use Polygrid to start off, and let's search for it in the browser. Polygrid is meant for creating different instruments like synthesizers, samplers, sequencers. So let's pull it up over here, and let's drag and drop it into the empty space beneath my pad track. Now, Bitwig is really intuitive, so it has guessed that I want it to create an instrument track, and it's automatically created one for me with Polygrid on it. Now, we can dive into the grid by clicking on its interface in the device panel, and its larger grid interface then pops up. Now, I can already play things with my Morph MIDI controller. We've just got a basic patch up with a triangle wave oscillator and a filter, but without getting too much into synthesis, especially if it's your first time looking at the grid, there's no need to be overwhelmed. We can always start with some presets. And really, the grid has some excellent presets that have been really thoughtfully created by the Bitwig team. Let's click on the folder icon that's next to the polygrid device's name, and let's pull up some presets. So as I mentioned, I'd like to add an additional layer that maybe doesn't sound like a traditional synth or like existing timbres that we have in this project. So one of my favorite tags to look under is the FX tag. So let's start off over here. I'm taking a look at some of these presets, and out of the selection I have, I've spotted one that's called Laser Lil Chickens. So let's go with that. I'm gonna click on it and press OK, and let's see how this sounds. Cool, very cool. I think this could work. So listening to it off the bat though, I think we could fine tune this a little bit more. I'd like to make this sound have a longer release. In the grid, we're able to scroll around. We can scroll up, down, left, and right. And let's locate one of the individual modules over here in this synth patch. I'd like to look for the amplitude envelope module, and I think I found it. I think it's over here. AR is a very common abbreviation for attack and release. And this is a module that we have in the grid that can help us shape the sound of synths that we have. Let's click on the release knob over here, which has the letter R underneath it, and let's increase it to maybe let's try, sure, close to 4 seconds, and let's take a listen now. Great. What has happened is that now when I play this particular synth, it's taking a longer time for the sound to completely die away. So that is a longer release, and I think that could work pretty well. So in addition to Polygrid, we've also got FX Grid for various custom audio effects. And in this case, I think we could use some of the FX Grid presets to also add to this sound. So let's go ahead and type FX Grid into the browser search bar. There it is. Let's pull it behind our instance of Polygrid over here. And let's start with another preset. So clicking on the little folder icon to pop up the browser as well. Maybe this time let's take a look at a reverb type of effect, and quickly browsing through a couple of these. Ooh, I think Retro Room sounds like it could be interesting. So let's go with that and press OK. And now let's take a listen to how our sound sounds. Very nice. Cool. You can hear the tail of that reverb. And I think we can work with this. So if I'm done editing the sound I currently have, let's get down to some recording. I'm going to close the grid for now by clicking on the X at the top right over here. And let's record in some effects into the end of my arrangement. So we'll start around maybe bar 39, and let's press record. Great, my sound effects are recorded in, and that is how we'll end this Bitwig project. So we've come to the end of this video, but really we've only scratched the surface of what Bitwig Studio can do. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you were interested in and inspired by some of the features of Bitwig Studio. For more information about Bitwig the company and Bitwig Studio the software, you can head over to bitwig.com, and that's where you can also download the software. Once again, my name is Marie Lim. I'm a Bitwig certified trainer and a proud member of the Bitwig community. Hope you're enjoying IMSTA FESTA 2020, and I hope to see you again soon.